If you've ever caught yourself organizing instead of acting, that's the trap. Your brain confuses planning your life with actually living it. The lists, the dashboards, the apps, they give you the illusion of progress while keeping you in the same place. And as comfortable as it feels, your comfort zone is stealing your future. The truth is, avoiding the hard steps only delays the life you want. So be honest with yourself. What excuse are you hiding behind right now? Because the real question isn't whether you're busy. It's whether you're actually moving forward. Why you're busy but not productive. Picture this: you sit at your desk, determined to tackle the project that's been hanging over you. You open your workspace, but instead of starting, you dive into tweaking color palettes, adjusting fonts, and decorating with little icons. Hours later, it looks polished, impressive even. But there's just one problem: the actual project hasn't moved forward. You've invested energy into presentation, not progress. This is why someone can feel endlessly busy while making almost no real headway. Surveys show the majority of students regularly procrastinate on schoolwork, often in the 50–90% range, while around a quarter of adults report being chronic procrastinators. That disconnect creates the illusion of effort while the truly important tasks sit untouched. The brain rewards activity itself, whether it's reorganizing lists or drafting a business plan, because both trigger similar chemical responses. Which explains how days filled with motion can still leave you right where you started. There's a term for this cycle: productivity theater. It looks like reshuffling your calendar, designing perfect workflows, or attending meetings where nothing concrete gets decided. On the surface, you look busy and driven, but the work with real stakes keeps getting delayed. What's fascinating is that researchers at McLean Hospital note procrastination often works as an emotion regulation tool. It helps soothe anxiety, perfectionism, or impulsivity in the short term, even while it sabotages your long-term goals. That makes productivity theater not just a habit, but a coping mechanism, one that feels protective even while it keeps you stuck. Think of what happens when you make a fresh plan, reinstall a new app, or sketch out an intricate vision board. Your brain gets a burst of satisfaction, almost as if you've taken a real step forward. But this reward kicks in long before you've written a page, sent the email, or made the call that matters. The shortcut dominates because it's faster, easier, and painless. The cost? By the time you come up for air, the actual deadline has crept closer while your energy is spent on surface-level details. That's why evenings disappear adjusting files no one will ever see, and weeks vanish juggling calendar labels while your real work idles in the background. On paper, you look maxed out, but those hours aren't buying you growth, they're renting you temporary relief. Every cycle deepens the habit of substituting appearance for impact. It's a familiar loop for most people. Delete distracting apps in the morning, scroll again by the afternoon. Install a new task manager, abandon it after a week. The label we slap on this cycle, being busy, is convenient, but it hides what's really happening. We are not avoiding effort because we're lazy. We're sidestepping work that carries risk, exposure, and the possibility of change. And this is the real danger. As addictive as productivity theater feels, it's not neutral. It keeps you rehearsing instead of performing. Every time you tell yourself you're preparing, setting up, or refining, what you're usually doing is avoiding the discomfort of meaningful action. You're buying time, but you're also paying with momentum. Understanding this matters because the barrier isn't lack of motivation. It's the resistance to stepping into something uncertain. Productivity theater protects you from that discomfort by keeping you occupied with familiar motions. It lets you look responsible without forcing the leap that might redefine who you are. So here's the key point. The biggest trap isn't disorganization, poor planning, or even procrastination by itself. It's this elaborate stage play of busyness that convinces you progress is happening when in truth you are circling in place. And that's why we need to call it what it is: productivity theater. The fix doesn't come from adding more apps or stacking more systems. It comes from recognizing what you're actually hiding from. And that means we have to look directly at the deeper fear beneath the busyness, the one that has nothing to do with tasks or tools and everything to do with who you are willing to become. The real enemy: fear of identity change. Most people believe they're afraid of failure, public embarrassment, rejection, wasted effort. But failure isn't usually the real obstacle. The deeper fear is identity change, the uneasy process of becoming someone other than who you are today. Big goals won't let you remain fixed in place. They require a version of you that thinks and acts beyond the standards you've grown used to. And because the human brain favors stability over evolution, staying the same feels safer than advancing toward the unknown. Recent psychology research shows procrastination is rarely just laziness. It often ties into anxiety, impulsivity, and harsh self-criticism, all markers of inner conflict about identity. When you hesitate, you're not simply dodging tasks, but sidestepping what those tasks represent, the demand to shed parts of your old self. This is why procrastination works like emotional armor. It gives short-term relief by protecting who you've been, even if that identity no longer fits where you want to go. Think back to moments when you tried to cut out a distraction. Maybe you deleted Netflix, swore you, de-reclaim your evenings, only to end up reinstalling it days later. On the surface, it looked like entertainment was the problem. But what really unsettled you was the silence, the awareness that your old routines no longer provided direction, while the new ones hadn't formed yet. In that gap, you face the uncomfortable truth. Growth starts where your current identity no longer covers the new ground you want to stand on. This is what makes transformation unsettling. It demands new standards, different habits, expectations that feel heavier than anything you've carried before. The habits that carried you through one season, say as a student or entry-level employee, don't translate into larger arenas. Yet letting go of those patterns can feel like betrayal of the self you know. So you stall, convincing yourself you're not ready. In reality, you're buying time to keep the familiar intact. None of this means your past identity was bad. It served you in earlier stages, helping you survive roles or circumstances where it was useful. But clinging to it when the context shifts is like refusing to change worn-out shoes. They're comfortable because they're familiar, but if you keep wearing them, they slow you down and hurt you. The same logic applies to old habits and self-definitions. The cost of holding on eventually outweighs the comfort. When seen this way, procrastination is less about managing tasks and more about protecting identity. Each time you delay sending the pitch, applying for the promotion, or taking the leap toward your next goal, you're unconsciously preserving the version of yourself who feels safe in smaller expectations. That's why finally acting can feel so overwhelming, because the real action isn't clicking, send, or opening the laptop, but letting go of the self you've relied on up to now. Safe feels predictable, and predictability is addictive. Even if predictability keeps you stuck in boredom or frustration, the brain perceives it as security. That's why people stay in jobs that drain them, revisit old routines that don't serve them, or endlessly postpone risks that might actually expand them. Avoidance in these moments feels less like laziness and more like preservation, holding on tightly to the certainty of who you've always been. When you put off difficult work, the reason often sounds logical. I need more time, or I just need the right system. But beneath those rationalizations sits one raw truth: I'm not sure I'm ready to stop being the person I am now. That hesitation isn't foolish, it's human. The old self feels tangible, known, validated. The future version feels abstract and untested. So your mind defends the old one, even when it costs you the life you say you want. This doesn't mean you flip identities overnight. Growth isn't a clean break, it's pruning. You trim away behaviors and expectations that no longer apply, making space for stronger ones to take their place. At first, that pruning hurts because you're cutting away what once felt normal and safe. But eventually, the discomfort opens room for expansion. The older identity isn't your enemy, it was your anchor during storms. But if you keep it tied down after the storm ends, it prevents you from moving at all. Here's the problem with 2025. Modern tools amplify the temptation to dodge this exact process. You can swap apps, update systems, and endlessly optimize without touching the root problem. Each upgrade feels like growth, but really lets you sidestep the deeper challenge of outgrowing old patterns. And because the tools seem so sleek and helpful, the fear of real identity change hides more easily, cloaked under layers of productivity hacks. So when you look at your stalled progress, the barrier isn't lack of motivation, time, or skill. It's the hesitation to surrender a version of yourself that feels safe. Transformation carries loss. You can't keep the habits, excuses, or roles of the past and simultaneously take on the responsibilities of the future. And until you admit that, every new strategy will eventually fail. Here's something concrete you can do right now. Ask yourself out loud, if I hit my goal, what will I stop being? That simple question cuts past excuses and forces honesty with yourself. Because what you're really afraid of is rarely the project. It's the identity you'll have to retire once it's done. And with that in mind, notice what comes next. We now live surrounded by tools, apps, and shortcuts designed to make productivity simple. On the surface, it seems progress should be easier than ever. But the truth is stranger than that. The 2025 productivity paradox. The 2025 productivity paradox isn't about having too little, it's about having too much. Apps, AI assistants, endless templates, and automated reminders flood your phone, your laptop, even your watch. Everywhere you look, there's a tool promising to make your life smoother. But instead of amplifying output, the sheer abundance is leaving people drained and unfocused. Reports show that while CEOs continue pouring money into productivity technology, only about a third actually report meaningful gains in employee output. And when AI first entered offices, many believed the results would be revolutionary. But research warns of the AI efficiency trap, where tools raise expectations, workloads swell, and instead of feeling liberated, workers end up overwhelmed. This is the paradox: more scaffolding than ever, yet less momentum. Organizing feels like progress, but the actual finish lines rarely move. Downloads rise, subscriptions grow. People spend weeks perfecting their dashboards, but projects remain stalled with the same regularity as before. More doesn't equal better. More only means more noise layered on top of hesitation. You can carry 3 calendars in your pocket, each one polished and color-coded, and still miss the only call that mattered. AI highlights the contradiction most sharply. One randomized trial in early 2025 showed something few expected. Experienced open-source developers actually slowed down when using AI assistants in that setting. The tools introduced friction, not flow. And even when they do speed things up in the short term, a creeping problem appears. As you lean on AI to decide, draft, or prioritize, your own confidence at making independent choices weakens. Psychologists call this agency decay, a subtle erosion of self-direction that makes people more dependent on the tools the longer they use them. The very systems designed to free your time and sharpen your skills can end up dulling them. At the same time, abundance breeds paralysis. Too many pathways make committing feel impossible. Psychologists call this effect choice overload. The more options you juggle, apps, interfaces, layouts, the more effort it takes just to decide which to use. Surveys from workplace services like Asana have found that workers increasingly feel buried under the very systems meant to streamline their days. The result? Hours disappear deciding between formats while the project itself never leaves the ground. And here's the hidden cost no one talks about. The energy poured into picking tools is the same energy needed to tackle real work. Decision fatigue accumulates before you've written a word or made a call. Imagine draining yourself comparing 5 project boards and feeling too exhausted to actually push one task forward. It looks like preparation, but what's really happening is erosion. 1,000 micro decisions grind down the energy you could have invested into one concrete step. You can see the pattern everywhere. A person sets up a pristine new dashboard, folders nested, categories assigned, covers polished, icons aligned. For 2 weeks it gleams like a monument. Then it collapses under its own weight. Complex systems invite their own failure because the upkeep outweighs the benefit. Think of cooking elaborate meals daily with dozens of ingredients. Eventually, you're not avoiding the food, you're avoiding the process. What looks like inconsistency is often just exhaustion from over-engineering. That exhaustion feeds the restart cycle. A new year hits. Instead of asking what habits broke them last year, people grab another shiny app. The cycle resets. Set up, decorate, abandon, repeat. It's attractive because new feels like hope, but the core problem never changes. Technology doesn't address hesitation, it lets you disguise it longer. You're not missing progress because your system isn't cutting edge enough. You're missing progress because the system itself has become the distraction. Seen in this light, 2025 holds its own peculiar trap. A generation ago, people struggled because resources were scarce. Today, the struggle comes from drowning in abundance. Scarcity limited action, excess now delays it, and culture rewards the show. Scroll online and you'll find productivity tour, videos showcasing pristine dashboards, flawless integrations, endless automation chains. They look impressive. But what's underneath? Work that actually gets finished, or just another polished performance? Too often, it's the performance. Tools are the exhibit. Progress is the missing piece. The danger deepens with illusion. When you're running the newest AI feature or the sleekest app, it feels like progress. It feels like security. But no dashboard, however flawless, advances your life. Only action does. That's why tools without execution are just decoration. They give the impression of direction while leaving you rooted in the same place. The gap between looking organized and being effective yawns wider with every new subscription. Workplace patterns prove this. Teams are introduced to project management systems with huge excitement, notifications synced, boards filled, milestones charted. By the second or third month, they fade. Why? Because managing the system becomes harder than completing the tasks. Software meant to reduce friction begins multiplying it. The weight of upkeep stalls the very progress it was designed to create. And this same cycle repeats at the personal level. Individuals fall into it, abandoning one app only to replace it with another, replaying the same collapse in endless loops. That's the real risk ahead, an endless carousel disguised as efficiency. Adding more won't save you. In fact, subtraction is the answer. Simplifying a process beats expanding it. A single tool used consistently beats 5 tools abandoned weekly. The paradox is solved not by layering systems higher, but by cutting them back to their core. The fewer decisions, the fewer delays. Simplicity gives clarity, and clarity finally allows movement. Before you download another tool, try this. Simplify one system for 48 hours. Strip it down to its bare bones and see what happens. You'll often find the structure you thought was your support was actually your obstacle. So ask yourself this: are you perfecting the tools or pursuing the results? If you're measuring progress by how polished your systems look instead of what you finished, you're trapped in the paradox. In 2025, the trap has never been sharper, because there will always be another AI feature, another sophisticated planner, another smarter template a click away. But none of them will decide, start, or complete the work for you. They can only cover hesitation in new clothes. That's why the real conversation has to change. The problem isn't whether you found the right tool. The problem is mistaking preparation for progress and equating setup with achievement. Simplification is the doorway to clarity. Clutter is the fog that keeps you locked in. Once you strip away the excess, something else emerges. You'll notice another pattern, one that doesn't just drain your hours but freezes entire months. It's not the tools themselves, but the overthinking they encourage, a quiet spiral where starting becomes harder than it should be. And that's what we need to confront next. Why analysis paralysis is your silent killer? Why do so many people spend more time circling decisions than actually making one? That pattern goes by a name: analysis paralysis. It shows up when you sit down to work, but instead of moving, you open a dozen tabs, skim through endless best beginner guides, compare another set of options, and tell yourself you're preparing. Hours later, your energy's drained, but the work hasn't even begun. What makes this dangerous is that it feels responsible. On the surface, it's research, preparation, or careful planning. But underneath, it's procrastination wearing a disguise. The allure of analysis paralysis is that it spares you from the discomfort of doing something uncertain. If you're still getting ready, there's no failure, no critique, and no pressure of results. The problem is, this comfort is short-lived. It buys ease in the moment, but steals long-term progress. A fitness example makes it obvious. Someone spends 2 weeks researching workout routines, building playlists, comparing apps, and designing the perfect schedule. But in those same 2 weeks, not one push-up happens. They've consumed time rehearsing, not performing. The truth is, no amount of reading will change the body. Only moved muscles do. And the same is true of every domain. Progress appears only when thought gives way to action. The bigger misunderstanding is about confidence. People wait to begin until they feel certain, but confidence doesn't arrive in advance. It's built through motion, not theory. Those who look self-assured aren't operating from perfect knowledge. They acted before clarity existed, and that action created the confidence they now carry. When you hesitate and think you're waiting for the right time, what you're really waiting for is a feeling that never comes until after you start. Psychologists note a few traps fueling this delay. One is the planning fallacy. The brain habitually underestimates how much time and effort things require. Another is the dopamine effect. Planning and preparing release small hits of satisfaction, which mimic the feeling of accomplishment. Making a list, mapping out a schedule, or downloading a new app can give the same brain reward as finishing the task itself. It tricks you into feeling progress while the actual work sits untouched. And because that little reward feels good, the brain wants to loop it again, reinforcing the cycle without real output. The danger is how quickly that loop becomes automatic. Every time you soothe uncomfortable feelings with research or planning, you strengthen the habit of delaying. Over time, it stops feeling like avoidance and starts feeling normal. But each extra circuit of that loop makes direct action heavier and more intimidating. That's why analysis paralysis isn't just a minor delay, it's a silent killer of goals. It drains momentum quietly, day after day, until you look back and realize months have passed without tangible change. You can see the erosion most clearly when big goals are at stake. Someone convinced they're almost ready to launch a business may gather articles, outline strategies, and polish logos while never actually selling one item or releasing one service. Years later, they've built folders of information but not a business. From the outside, it looks like preparation. From the inside, it feels like productivity. But the result matches inaction. Potential sits as potential while nothing real moves forward. And this problem persists because clarity is misunderstood. Clarity doesn't precede action, it's created by it. You don't gain certainty by waiting until every detail lines up. You gain certainty by stepping in imperfectly and letting those steps sharpen your vision. Every draft clarifies the idea more than another week of outlining. Every attempt smooths the process more than another spreadsheet. It will always feel unclear before starting, because starting is the thing that produces clarity. That is why so many elaborate rituals don't help. Picking the right notebook, testing 7 list apps, arranging the perfect workspace, none actually matter when the heart of the work is still untouched. They reduce anxiety for a moment, but they don't create real progress. It's worth laughing at yourself here. No one's project collapsed because they used blue sticky notes instead of yellow ones. Yet hours vanish into fine-tuning these distractions, which become a safe mask for fear. The cost is steep. Opportunities won't wait. Deadlines close, applications expire, seasons of life change. Often when people say there wasn't enough time, the truth is the time was spent paralyzed in preparation. Analysis paralysis doesn't take away your chance in one dramatic moment. It bleeds away your edge in pieces until you don't even notice what you've lost. And because it feels like effort, it's harder to catch yourself doing it. At its core, procrastination of this kind is rarely laziness. It's difficulty regulating uncomfortable emotions. Overthinking functions as mood repair. If beginning the task stirs anxiety, then endlessly setting up feels safer. It calms nerves, but only temporarily. Because while the task is delayed, the weight of it grows heavier. Starting becomes harder, fear enlarges, and eventually the simple act of beginning feels impossible. That's how analysis paralysis ties directly into identity. Each cycle chips away at your belief in your own ability to act, until hesitation feels like who you are rather than what you're doing. The psychological answer is proving the opposite to yourself in small doses. Researchers emphasize the power of making the threshold tiny. One method recommended by clinicians is the 15-minute rule. Instead of promising yourself the perfect plan or an all-day session, you commit to just starting for 15 minutes. A timer sets the boundary. The shortened window lowers the pressure, sidesteps endless deliberation, and tricks the brain into entry. More often than not, once those first 15 minutes end, momentum is already built, and continuing feels easier than it did before. When you combine that with an understanding of dopamine, the picture becomes clearer. The brain rewards small completions, not just large ones. Completing even a tiny piece of the task generates a real release, different from the false reward of planning. That reward then pulls you forward into the next action, which pulls you again, creating a chain reaction. The fastest way out of paralysis is not more thinking. It's engineering a small, guaranteed win that proves movement is possible. So here's a micro action you can take right now. Pause this video, set a 15-minute timer, and do the smallest possible. Start on the task you've been avoiding, write the first sentence, sketch the initial outline, or open the document and type a title. Don't aim to finish. Aim to begin. That single shift interrupts the loop and gives your brain the evidence it needs that momentum is forming. Once you see how quickly overthinking collapses when movement enters, a bigger question emerges. If the starting point is that powerful, why keep surrounding yourself with systems that make starting harder? Why fill your day with structures that multiply the number of decisions instead of reducing them? Because maybe the real issue is that you lack discipline. It's that the design of your systems is broken. And if that structure is quietly exhausting you, no amount of willpower will save it. The system shift, simplify to amplify. What if the obstacle has never been a lack of drive, but the framework you're forcing yourself to use every day? People assume success belongs to those with endless reserves of discipline. But research shows it's not willpower holding the line, it's structure. The human brain doesn't thrive on juggling endless options. It thrives when choices are reduced, when the path feels narrow and clear. Psychologists warn that decision fatigue erodes follow-through, so fewer choices almost always mean more action. Complexity doesn't sharpen performance, it quietly drains it before the work even begins. There's a common myth that top performers live inside complicated setups, 6 apps synced together, dashboards with layers of metrics, constant alerts pinging from every device. The reality flips that belief. The more elaborate the system, the more friction it builds. The actual producers aren't spending energy babysitting platforms. They're trimming systems down so their attention flows into execution. And at the core of their approach, 3 rules emerge. First, keep a single trusted task list. Fragmented notes and scattered apps multiply clutter instead of progress. Second, protect 1 to 2 deep blocks each day, because those windows of concentration move projects forward more than any surface-level multitasking ever could. Third, only use tools you touch daily. Anything else is ornament. Less app, more action. Now examine the setup you're using. How many separate places are you storing commitments? Perhaps tasks hide inside email, deadlines live on one calendar, ideas fill your notes app, and projects scatter into 3 different platforms. Each container feels convenient, but together they form an invisible tax. Every time you think, where did I save that? You spend energy that could have advanced your work. The brain isn't running out of hours. It's bleeding focus into retrieving crumbs of information. Multiply those moments across weeks, and you're left with exhaustion without meaningful completion. This erosion is what psychologists describe as decision fatigue. You make confident choices early, but as the day drags on, quality drops. Why? Because every micro-decision consumes a slice of limited capacity. Searching, sorting, and switching across 5 different organizational tools burns that fuel before the important decisions even arrive. By the evening, the simplest choice, what should I do first, feels heavier than it needs to. And when that weight creeps in, delay sets the rhythm. The real mistake comes from equating complexity with control. 5 overlapping lists don't mean multiplied discipline, they mean confusion. You can feel this when the first 20 minutes of the day go into organizing priorities instead of acting on them. A system that forces hesitation is worse than no system at all because it paralyses action under the illusion of productivity. Your daily framework shouldn't resemble a labyrinth. If you need to decode the design before you can even start, the design is working against you. So the shift you need isn't about more tools or more features. It's about subtraction. The human mind has limits. It's not built to map every option at once. When you simplify, you create the clarity that momentum requires. Systems should behave like straight lines, not spirals. The Ivy Lee method proves how stripped-down structure works. Write down the 6 most important tasks at the end of each day, sort them by priority, and tackle them one by one tomorrow. That's it, no software suite required. 6 items, clear order, no decision fatigue. The strength of this method is how it starves hesitation and clears the way for forward steps. Consider another approach, habit stacking. Instead of inventing space for a new behavior, link it to something you already do. Pair a 2-minute stretch with brushing your teeth. Place a journal beside your morning coffee. Rather than imagining where a new habit fits, your existing rhythm absorbs it. This technique removes choice entirely, no extra decision, no scheduling friction. What felt like self-discipline was really better placement, built on patterns already established. For prioritization, the Eisenhower matrix provides another example of clear design. By dividing tasks into urgent, important, delegatable, and irrelevant, it forces sharp distinctions. Instead of treating every task as equal and being buried under lists, you trim away low-value items quickly. That clarity ensures your energy isn't stolen by things that don't matter. Again, the appeal isn't complexity, it's the speed at which clarity arrives. Notice that none of these systems look glamorous. They don't decorate your desktop or give you colorful charts to screenshot. But effectiveness runs in the opposite direction of entertainment. The goal isn't visual flair, and it isn't the rush of reordering digital boards. The goal is direct movement into meaningful work. If the system you've designed doesn't move you there every day, it's not solving the problem, it is the problem. This is why too many people collapse under beautiful systems. They've bought into the idea that more structure equals more discipline. But discipline born in friction doesn't last. Simplicity does. Consolidate your tasks into one place, guard daily deep work, and only keep tools that earn their use. These principles strip away false preparation and clear space for execution. Simplicity liberates energy. Complexity folds it in on itself. Imagine waking up with one trusted system holding everything. You open it and see 3 priorities set from the night before. No searching, no hesitation, no layers of apps to navigate. You simply start. Mental energy remains intact. Confidence builds with each completed task. This is the amplify hidden in simplicity. When small rules remove the clutter, action doubles because all attention flows forward. And here's the hidden payoff. As systems simplify, the unease that once fueled procrastination fades. You end the loop of wondering, which app do I open first? Or what's the top priority? Because the system already answers the question. That uncluttered start frees your focus. It turns hesitation into certainty, and what once felt like a daily uphill push begins to feel less like resistance and more like rhythm. The larger truth is that your energy isn't stolen by the hard tasks themselves. It's drained by a bloated framework that forces choices on details that shouldn't need them. Once you cut excess decisions, your effort stops leaking and redirects straight into the work that matters. It's subtraction as strategy. The leaner the design, the more power it channels. So the question is whether you can let go of clutter masquerading as control. Are you ready to stop equating sleek dashboards with progress and start measuring progress in work that's done? Because the next shift isn't about another app. It's about committing to simpler flows that generate motion instead of friction. Simpler lists, clearer blocks, cleaner structures. Simplify to amplify. But clarity alone isn't enough. You also need a way to guard your time so it doesn't vanish into interruptions and scattered focus. And that's where another approach enters, structuring hours in a way that actually holds up in daily life. Time blocking that actually works. Why does time blocking collapse so quickly for so many people? The idea looks straightforward: divide your day into planned blocks and focus. But most approaches fail because they're too rigid. People cram every slot of their calendar with detail and leave no room for interruptions. By midweek, the whole structure falls apart. The better version isn't rigid control, it's flexible anchoring, where the essentials are protected and buffers absorb the rest. Think of blocks as containers for priorities, not cages for every 10-minute slice of your day. Most plans crash when they treat humans like machines. The brain doesn't run well on nonstop scheduling. It runs in peaks and valleys. Research confirms this. Attention doesn't remain linear for hours. When you push beyond its natural rhythm, concentration collapses. The smarter move is to work with those cycles, either protecting 1 or 2 deep sessions of 60 to 90 minutes, or breaking tasks into shorter sprints, such as a 25-minute Pomodoro followed by a 5-minute pause. One strategy favors endurance focus, the other leverages pressure from tighter bursts. Which path you choose depends on how your energy runs, but both align with the way attention actually operates. People often imagine that time blocking means obsessively filling every slot, emails at 8:00, calls at 8:15, notes at 8:30. That fragility guarantees breakdown. Instead, anchoring by larger blocks works because it acknowledges reality. For example, 2 uninterrupted hours in the morning for your most important work, then a focused 45-minute block for communication, then a block in the afternoon for follow-up projects. This structure breathes. Even if a few interruptions strike, the weight of your intended work still gets done. Micromanagement tries to control, anchoring ensures core outcomes. The beauty of this approach is how it leaves space for human unpredictability. Life doesn't run on rails, calls happen, moods shift, delays appear. A breathing calendar accommodates that without collapsing. When blocks are designed to protect priorities rather than track every action, you can adapt without guilt. Miss a slice and you still return to the anchors in place. That adaptability is not weakness. It is what keeps time blocking usable after the first day. To make this practical, here are 3 rules that turn flexible blocking into something workable every week. First, schedule 1 or 2 deep sessions of 60 to 90 minutes during your natural energy peak. This is where your most creative or challenging work happens. Second, batch administrative and shallow tasks into a single 45 to 60-minute block, emails, calls, logistics, so you stop scattering them across the day. Third, leave 15 to 30 minutes of open buffer between the anchors. This room absorbs the interruptions that will inevitably arrive, preventing your plan from collapsing when life shows up. These 3 adjustments make blocking less of a burden and more of a rhythm you can keep. Notice how these rules simplify choices. At the start of the day, you don't juggle 10 different competing tasks. You already know your protected block. That clarity removes the mental negotiation that fuels procrastination. When it's time for shallow work, you're not wrestling with pop-up decisions because the container for those tasks already exists. When interruptions intrude, you don't feel punished because your structure held a buffer. Instead of calendars that guilt you with missed slots, you build a framework that supports how humans actually function. This structure also pairs well with energy-based scheduling, what some call chronoblocking. When you observe your natural peaks and valleys, you can match the right block to the right time. If you think most clearly in the morning, protect that space. Put shallow tasks in the slump window of late afternoon. The gain isn't about more hours, but better allocation. Instead of wasting your sharpest focus on minor emails, you spend it on the work that reshapes results. That one swap, aligning energy to task type, gives more output than any new app. Flexibility doesn't eliminate intentionality, it strengthens it. Without anchors, shallow tasks flood the day while deep work suffocates. With anchors, the inverse happens. Priorities surface first, and the smaller items flow around them. You don't need to obsess over every minute to extract value. Instead, you need to define the moments of greatest value and wall those off with simplicity. Look at a working example. Imagine blocking 2 90-minute sessions for deep writing across the week. During those windows, notifications are off, doors are closed, and the task is singular. Around them, you add 2 afternoons of 45-minute admin batches where all emails, invoices, and calls are processed at once. Between those blocks, 20 minutes sit open for margins and flexibility. Even if interruptions strike, the deep blocks were already protected, meaning your highest value output survives untouched. The system bent, but it didn't break. That ability to bend also solves the "I don't have time" excuse. Everyone has the same scattered hours. The difference is whether those hours remain unanchored or bound by clear containers. Anchors ensure what matters gets its own lane, while the rest fits around it. Without them, shallow work steals bandwidth invisibly until the day ends and your best work remains undone. With them, even half-days become more productive than full days wasted in scatter. This is where sustainability emerges. What makes time blocking powerful isn't perfection on a single day, it's accumulation across weeks. A rigid schedule breaks the first time an interruption arrives. A flexible design endures. Over months, those preserved blocks of uninterrupted deep work add up to output that micromanagement never sustains. Systems aren't judged by how neat they appear on paper. They're judged by whether priorities consistently happen in reality. So if time blocking has disappointed you before, reconsider the design. You don't need to abandon it, you need to adapt it. Anchor your top priorities in realistic sessions. Batch the shallow tasks together. Guard space for buffers. Match tasks to energy peaks. That simplicity is the line between a calendar that burns you out and one that protects your best work. And once those anchors are in place, something subtle changes. The blocks stop feeling like barriers, and they start feeling like clear invitations. You know exactly when and where to show up, and the mental drag of deciding is gone. That lack of drag lowers resistance. You step into blocks with less fight. From there, progress depends less on discipline and more on the small actions you begin inside those protected windows. Once you protect blocks, micro-commitments make those blocks easy to enter. The power of micro-commitments. Small beginnings carry more weight than they look. The reason a massive leap feels impossible isn't because you lack potential, it's because your brain perceives it as too much at once. The pressure of a giant demand triggers hesitation, stirs fear, and makes you stall. But a micro-commitment, something so small it feels almost laughable, slips beneath that radar. That's the power in making a promise so easy you can't argue with it. A single sentence, 5 minutes of walking, 1 email sent. These tiny starts work not because they're impressive, but because they get you moving without resistance. And that one motion changes everything. This approach isn't new, it's rooted in behavioral psychology. BJ Fogg's work on tiny habits shows that small, consistent actions bypass overwhelm and create footholds where bigger promises fail. James Clear's Atomic Habits asterisk builds on the same truth, making habits obvious, simple, and achievable. Both agree, if the bar is too high, the brain resists. But when the starting effort is nearly effortless, resistance never rises. Research from McLean Hospital echoes this with a practical guideline. Start small, 15 minutes or even 1 line of progress, and let momentum carry the rest. That single step cuts through hesitation in a way waiting for inspiration never will. Think about how often people wait for motivation, hoping it will arrive like lightning. But motivation is unreliable. You can sit frozen for days, waiting for the right mood. The trick is realizing that motivation doesn't precede action, it follows it. Once you start, even on the smallest scale, you create momentum. And momentum is what makes motivation show up. Micro-commitments simply guarantee that you cross the starting line, which means momentum has a chance to build. That's why people who plan only to write 1 sentence often end up filling an entire page. They weren't brimming with energy beforehand, they just gave themselves a doorway small enough to step through. Consider a simple demonstration of how this works. Someone promises 5 minutes of writing. 5 minutes could vanish scrolling a feed so it feels harmless. They sit, jot down 1 line, then another. Their brain clicks into gear, and suddenly 5 minutes stretch into 30. The reason isn't magic, it's chemistry. Completing even a small action releases dopamine, giving the brain a quick signal. Progress is happening. That micro-reward lessens resistance to the next step. The loop continues, each action pulling you into the one that follows. Resistance breaks not by leaps, but by small, consistent slips beneath the guard of fear. You've experienced this chain reaction before, even if you didn't notice it. Maybe you told yourself you de-clean a single plate, only to end up washing the whole sink. Or you promised to just stretch, but once your sneakers were on, you wandered into a jog. The science is the same. The initial commitment is so small your brain doesn't bother fighting. Once you're moving, you've tilted momentum in your favor. Micro-commitments aren't about lowering ambition, they're about lowering the barrier that blocks action. This explains why sweeping goals often backfire. Ambitious resolutions demand all or nothing commitment right away. An hour of meditation every morning, 3 chapters a week, a complete diet overhaul overnight. For a few days, sheer intensity holds. But the weight of expectation crashes down, turning what started as motivation into dread. Avoidance grows, not because the person is weak, but because the promise was too heavy. Micro-commitments reset the game. They shrink the demand to something your nervous system doesn't reject. And stacked daily, they create genuine transformation that the big leap never sustains. Identity is the deeper mechanism here. You don't declare yourself a runner, reader, or creator and then wait for proof. The proof has to come first. Each tiny action becomes evidence. A single line written proves you're a writer. A 10-minute stretch proves you're someone who moves. A quick call proves you're someone who follows through. Over time, these micro wins accumulate into a new identity. You begin to see yourself not as the person who hesitates, but as someone who acts. This shift is far more durable than temporary hype because it's built from lived, repeated evidence. The simplicity makes micro-commitments universal. Want to improve fitness? Commit to 1 set of push-ups. Want to reduce procrastination in studying? Promise to open your textbook for 2 minutes. Want to move a business forward? Send 1 message to 1 lead. Each is trivial enough to start but powerful enough to trigger a chain reaction once begun. They are Trojan horses, sneaking past resistance disguised as low stakes, but once inside, they open the gates to fuller progress. For you, it may look even more practical. If you're balancing school, work, and life demands, it doesn't matter that you can't block out 2 perfect hours. You can still commit to something small right in the cracks of your schedule. Write 1 paragraph on your lunch break. Film a quick 30-second clip for your project. Send 1 outreach message before bed. You don't need the polished ritual or the perfect time. You need 1 act that is easier to say yes to than no. And over time, those acts pile into a rhythm of proof that builds confidence without draining energy. Humor even makes the contrast clear. Your brain mocks the pressure of massive commitments, run a marathon tomorrow. Good luck. But it never argues with lacing up sneakers for 5 minutes. You won't win against the impossibility of sudden transformation, but you can trick yourself into momentum by making the first move too easy to refuse. Over and over, people underestimate what these small entries unlock. They think, what's the point of a single paragraph? But the paragraph done today is worth infinitely more than the perfect book idea trapped in thought for years. The accumulative effect of this can't be overstated. When you keep stacking these promises, consistency reshapes how you view yourself. You stop labeling yourself as someone who always postpones, always quits, always waits. You begin to recognize the pattern of following through, even on small terms. That consistency builds confidence, and confidence starts leaking into higher stakes actions. Micro commitments aren't about staying small forever, they're about proving you can start reliably. And once you know you can start, bigger moves stop feeling out of reach. So here's the most actionable instruction you can take from this. Set a 15-minute timer or promise one line of work today. Not tomorrow, not when you feel like it, today. Let the beginning be small enough that resistance ignores it. Because each time you do, you're turning identity into evidence, showing yourself you can start, and starting is the only path forward. Do this as a promise you can keep, then stack. But even with a tool as effective as micro-commitments, many people still hesitate. And the reason is subtle. They've been taught myths about productivity, myths that sound practical but quietly keep them paralyzed. Unless you recognize those beliefs for what they are, you'll keep waiting for permission that never comes. Which means before you move forward, we need to separate truth from the illusions that are holding you still. Breaking the myths that keep you stuck. The real obstacle stopping most people isn't effort or discipline, it's the myths they keep repeating to themselves. These myths sound logical on the surface, even protective, but in practice, they operate like invisible chains. They turn hesitation into something that feels respectable, calling it waiting, preparing, or planning. But beneath that disguise, they quietly strip away progress. If you've ever wondered why your goals stall even when you care deeply, it's likely because one of these myths has been running the show. Myth number 1, I have to wait until I feel motivated. This one might be the most seductive of all because it feels true in the moment. You tell yourself you'll act when inspiration strikes, when the spark finally arrives. But behavioral research consistently shows motivation rarely precedes action in any reliable way. More often, it emerges after you start, through the very motion you were trying to avoid. Think back to the times you dreaded a workout, a project, or even a phone call. At first, you resisted, but once you began, momentum pulled you forward. That shift wasn't luck, it was biology. Action generates the confidence and energy you thought you needed beforehand. Small starts, the first sentence typed, the first step outside, activate that loop far more often than waiting for a mystical surge of motivation that rarely arrives on schedule. Action breeds motivation, not the other way around. Myth number 2, I can't succeed until I build the perfect system. This version of the story seems even more practical because it disguises itself as preparation. People spend weeks testing apps, designing elaborate workflows, and crafting the ultimate plan for productivity. But this is where productivity turns into performance. Experts have a term for it, productivity theater. It's the rehearsal of work without the work itself, an illusion of control that substitutes polish for progress. Research on high performers shows they don't rely on intricate, bloated systems. They turn to the simplest setups possible so that their bandwidth isn't drained on maintenance. Streamlined structures free more time for action. Complex ones trick you into thinking setup is the same as execution. Every hour sunk into color-coding folders is an hour not spent finishing what matters. Systems serve the work. You have to be careful not to flip it and let the work serve the systems. Myth number 3, I'll start once I have more time. On the surface, this sounds rational. It frames hesitation as a scheduling problem, but calendars rarely ever clear. Life accelerates, responsibilities pile, and tomorrow often looks just as crowded as today. Believing time will magically expand is a subtle form of self-sabotage. Psychology calls this a disconnect from the future self. You allow your present comfort to hand off responsibility to a later version of you. But that later version never arrives. The reality is that progress rarely requires endless free space. Small windows, a spare 5 minutes, a 15-minute block, a short daily start, create more change than waiting for wide-open days that never appear. Behavior research confirms small, repeated efforts stack into identity shifts far more reliably than occasional big pushes. Time expands when you use it, not when you wait for it to become ideal. Each of these myths carries the same hidden problem. They move control outside of you. Motivation is framed as something to receive, not create. The system is something external you must master before acting. More time is something the world owes you. When you put progress in the hands of external conditions, you give yourself permission to stand still. And that permission feels nice in the moment, because you can postpone the risk of failure and soothe yourself with the story of not yet. But it's precisely that comfort that steals years from people. Here's where the challenge hits closer to home. Which one of these myths have you leaned on this week? Did you wait for the right energy? Did you tweak endless details in a system instead of tackling the project itself? Did you tell yourself next week will have more space than this one? Be honest about it. Call it out. Drop one sentence in the comments naming the myth that shows up most in your own routine, not as an abstract idea, but as an actual accountability checkpoint. You'll be surprised how powerful it feels to label the illusion out loud, instead of letting it work silently in the background. Breaking myths isn't about memorizing clever phrases, it's about refusing permission to keep postponing. Once you recognize the patterns, they stop appearing like logical plans and start revealing themselves as hiding places. And once you see the hiding places clearly, the next step is choosing action even while those voices whisper. Action in the absence of perfect energy. Action with imperfect systems. Action in the margins of time instead of the wide-open days. This is what separates people who grow from those who stay stuck. Not talent, not resources, not cosmic inspiration. Simply the willingness to stop waiting on myths that never deliver. Every time you postpone until later, you allow the illusion to write another page of your story. Every time you start in the middle of imperfection, you flip the script. Waiting feels safe, but the cost is invisible years of lost momentum. Acting feels uncomfortable at first, but it quietly reshapes your identity, one decision at a time. So pause right here and ask yourself the sharper question: which myth has been running your life? Which excuse have you made sound respectable? And more importantly, when will you finally stop? You don't shrink fear by overthinking it, and you don't create change by waiting on a condition that never arrives. Momentum belongs to those who act before they feel ready, in contexts that are rarely ideal. And here's the shift to hold on to. The turning point never comes from more theories or better explanations. It comes the moment you replace myths with proof created by action. That proof doesn't need to be massive. It starts as evidence you offer yourself daily, a page written, a call made, one decision followed through. Small actions stack into identity, but only when you stop letting myths delay the start. The good news is, you already have everything you need to begin. No extra energy, no perfect system, no sudden free calendar required. Just the resolve to stop outsourcing responsibility to myths. Now that those illusions have been stripped away, the next step is testing yourself with structure. Because knowledge of the myths is only half the battle. Without deliberate, daily practice, you will slip back into the same waiting loops. And what you need now isn't just an idea, it's a concrete challenge that forces consistency until action becomes your natural rhythm. Your 30-day action challenge. The decisions you make in the coming weeks can't remain abstract. They need a structure that forces movement and gives you a clear record of proof. That's why the next step is not another idea or tool, it's a 30-day action challenge. 30 consecutive days create enough weight to shift habits, but are still short enough for the brain to accept. In that defined time frame, you stop waiting for readiness and start collecting evidence that you can show up. And evidence, not inspiration, is what builds self-belief. This challenge compresses action into a container small enough to commit to, but long enough to matter. 30 days break inertia, train consistency, and replace hesitation with rhythm. It works because your mind resists forever but accepts just a month. And once you cross that threshold, the proof stacks daily until identity begins to shift. Research on habit formation and procrastination explains this progression. Small wins build self-control and reduce anxiety, creating space for bigger habits to take root. That sequential change is what frees you from an endless loop of preparing but never starting. Here's how to run your own 30-day action challenge. 4 weeks, each with a specific focus. Stick to it, And by the end, you won't just hold goals in theory, you'll be holding proof in reality. Week 1, micro commitments. Start with actions that feel too small to resist. That could be 15 minutes of concentrated focus, 1 paragraph of writing, or 2 minutes of movement. Keep the bar deliberately low so resistance doesn't activate. The goal isn't performance, it's repetition. By the end of this first week, you've proven the hardest part, showing up, is possible. That becomes the foundation for everything else. Week 2, protect 1 daily deep work block. Choose a 60 to 90-minute window, phones silenced and distractions cleared, for something that matters. This could mean studying, creating, or tackling your most important project. Many people find morning works best, but the exact time isn't as important as consistency. Ordinary days scatter into noise. This block anchors them. Even if the rest of the day fragments into interruptions, you'll know you did the work that moves life forward. Week 3, remove 1 major distraction. This step is subtraction, not addition. Delete 1 app, silence a cycle of notifications, or shut down the background loop that keeps stealing your focus. Don't overwhelm yourself by cutting everything at once, just rip out 1 root system of distraction. The change feels immediate because you already have commitments to fill the gap. The message to yourself is clear. Your attention is no longer negotiable. Week 4, review, sustain, and add accountability. Look back over the past 3 weeks and study what held and what slipped. Identify the wins you want to stabilize, then lock them into your routine going forward. This final week is about reinforcement, not punishment. To strengthen it further, add accountability. Share your progress with a trusted friend, join a small group, or post in a focused community. Research shows that social support buffers fatigue and strengthens resilience. It's harder to back out once more than 1 set of eyes is watching. This isn't about pressure, it's about shared momentum. Across these 4 weeks, you've stepped through a progression: small starts, deeper sessions, subtraction of noise, and reinforcement through review. Each stage is designed to lower resistance, build trust, and create proof. That matters because the brain doesn't unlock confidence at the beginning. It grows confidence only after sustained evidence. This sequence puts evidence in your hands, day by day, until your identity shifts from someone who plans to someone who acts. It's important to understand that perfection isn't required here. Missing 1 day doesn't reset the entire challenge. This isn't a streak you fail by breaking. It's a process you succeed by sustaining. If you miss a Tuesday, continue on Wednesday. Progress lies in the pattern, not flawless execution. That rule removes the all-or-nothing trap that destroys most attempts at change. What carries you is consistency built over weeks, not unattainable perfection. What really changes in these 30 days isn't just the visible output, but what you believe about yourself. With each completed day, you are not only ticking off a task, you are collecting proof that you're capable of following through. That proof builds self-efficacy, a belief in your ability to act, which psychology shows is one of the strongest predictors of lasting change. 30 days straight give you a bank of memories that tell you, this isn't theory anymore, this is who I am becoming. The payoff grows faster than you expect. A writer who begins with 1 paragraph a day often finds by week 3 they've drafted pages. A person who commits to a short daily workout by week 4 feels momentum pulling them toward bigger goals. What began as minimal starts evolves into sustained depth, not because you forced leaps, but because you learned to travel step by step without breaking rhythm. This is also where resilience is built. When you inevitably face days of low energy, you'll know that the challenge survives small stumbles. Instead of collapsing into guilt or restarting from zero, you'll continue. That resilience forces you to adopt a new belief. Setbacks aren't defeat, they're part of the process. And once you internalize that, procrastination loses its main weapon, the belief that 1 broken day erases your effort. At the same time, accountability turns this from a private experiment into a visible commitment. You don't have to announce it to the world, but 1 friend or 1 small community is enough. The act of sharing makes your actions real in a way the mind can't rationalize away. Each update says, I keep my word, which intensifies your own commitment. That external reinforcement combines with internal proof to create a loop of strength. By the end of the 30 days, what you hold is more than completed tasks. You hold a structure, a record, and an identity shift. Where before you waited for readiness, now you act while imperfect. Where before you confused planning with progress, now you measure progress in tangible wins. That transition is what accelerates long-term goals. You don't just think you can change, you have lived proof in your daily choices. This is why 30-day frameworks are used across fitness, writing, and personal development communities. They provide enough space for growth, but keep commitment close enough to feel possible. They train discipline while lowering overwhelm. And more importantly, they end with concrete proof, a baseline of trust you can expand into bigger efforts. Whether you continue with another 30 days or use the momentum for a different challenge, the foundation is already there. The mini payoff of this experiment shows up in how you carry yourself after it ends. You don't have to say, "I think I can show up." You already know. You've shown up 30 times. Tangible proof erases hesitation. And once that cycle of hesitation is broken, larger moves, career decisions, creative goals, personal projects become less daunting. You've proven to yourself that showing up isn't a theory, it's a lived behavior. This is the invitation. Stop recycling plans, stop polishing excuses, and choose 30 days of proof. Once you do, you step into momentum that can't be taken away from you. No system, no tool, no external factor carries more weight than your own evidence. 1 month from now, you could already be living with that evidence in your hands. And at that point, a bigger truth emerges. Real change isn't about whether you feel ready, it's about whether you're willing to move while uncertain. You'll learn that starting small still rewires everything, that sustained action breaks delay better than any motivational speech. The question left is whether you'll commit now or continue postponing. Because the real challenge isn't mapping 30 days, it's confronting what you fear will happen after those 30 days. And that's where the deeper battle lies, the one that decides whether you evolve or stay locked in cycles that feel safe but suffocating. That choice is waiting for you now. Growth always asks for a price: identity change. The version of you that stays comfortable cannot carry you to the version of life you want, but the trade isn't as overwhelming as it looks. The path forward is built from small, steady actions that add up: 15 minutes of focus, 1 sentence written, 1 simple choice followed through. Those moments become evidence, and evidence builds belief. So here's your challenge. Comment 1 micro commitment you'll do in the next 24 hours. 1 line, 1 block, 1 small step. Start now, measure small wins, and let momentum prove the rest.